Thanks for being here. Subscribe to Cheating Stories Best, so you don't miss new stories.
The wife made a mess of things and the husband had to suffer? In today's second part of the story, we're going to find out. Enjoy the show! At this point, Isaac stopped watching. He turned off the hard drives and called the woman from the FBI. It took a while, but when he finally got through and explained what he had seen, they arrived very quickly. Isaac had already packed 2 discs and told the woman, "I need a certified copy of the recordings from these dates." He handed her a dated note and continued, "These notes show that I have been slandered and imprisoned despite my innocence. I am going to settle some accounts." Lydia was busy. She worked as a legal secretary for the prosecutor, a job that Peter had arranged for her. She survived the whole mess because she stopped seeing Peter shortly before he was arrested. She felt some guilt towards Isaac, but if Isaac had just given up, since she had taken an oath in court, there was no way to retreat. Because of this, she had already paid a heavy price. Her daughter barely spoke to her because of this and the fact that she was forced to cooperate. She had just finished the letter when the prosecutor and the woman entered the office. "Lydia, could you come into my office for a minute?" When she entered the prosecutor's office, the woman said, "Please close the door and sit down." A large TV was installed in front of them. The woman introduced herself as Agent Smith from the FBI and showed her credentials. She sat down and said, "We are resuming the case of Isaac Manor." Lydia turned pale. A heavy lump formed in her stomach. "And this is necessary, why?" Agent Smith continued, "I think you know why we're here, don't you?" "And no, why?" asked the now seriously nervous Lydia. "I'll show you a few examples of why," was the dry reply. The big screen lit up, and Lydia saw herself sitting with Peter Rams and heard them plotting to slander Isaac. She fainted. When she came to, there was great commotion around her. She opened her eyes and noticed that she was lying on the floor. Not far away, the prosecutor was handcuffed with contempt in her eyes. Agent Smith told him, "You think you can get away with this? Or that the judge and the warden will get away too? We have months of tapes, including a murder plot involving all of you, and it's all completely legal because everything was recorded in the house and the owner himself gave them to us." A week later, Lydia confessed. Ramsey was visited in his cell and formally charged with enough crimes to ensure he would spend the rest of his life in prison. Isaac learned that Lydia had been convicted of false reporting to the police and perjury. He quietly made it clear that he would be unhappy with any action that might harm the mother of his former daughter, as it would leave her without a family. He went to Ben and said he wanted to scare Lydia as retribution. Ben got to work and said it wouldn't bring in much, but he was going to sue Lydia for $1,100,000 for every year Isaac spent in prison. Ramsey was about to be deprived of his family fortune. He was sued for $1 million for each year Isaac was imprisoned, as well as for damage to his home and the environment. A lawsuit was also filed against the city of Denz for its part in the unjustified imprisonment. The city authorities settled the matter very quickly. Ramsey, with his inflated ego, thought the lawsuit would have no consequences. His lawyer did his job but spent as little effort on the case as possible, as he was tired of dealing with the ex-sheriff's demands. As a result, the court decided that Isaac's claim was justified, and the sheriff was deprived of his fortune. This helped because the money went into a trust fund for Isaac, and Ben's investment company, Iscom, managed it. Lydia was really scared of Isaac's lawsuit. She was in prison, she no longer had a job, her house was about to be repossessed for failure to pay the mortgage, and where would she find $1,550,000? She was not abused or otherwise harmed in prison, it was worse in its own way. She was completely ignored by her fellow inmates. They turned away when she tried to speak, and she had a separate cell because no one wanted to be near her. They preferred to sleep on the floor somewhere else. Lydia had heard talk of an investment program, and when she asked what it was about, one of the guards cynically replied that many prisoners owed her money for putting their ex-husbands in prison, otherwise, Funds Beacon would never have been created. In her misery, she forgot about it again. Shortly after, Ramsey learned that Isaac had been awarded $55 million and another $500,000 for renovations. He screamed that he was going to kill Isaac. Less than a week had passed before 4 visitors came to him again at night. This time, they were not so soft. Isaac had been out of prison for a year now. K2 joined him in freedom, and they became close friends. Isaac's house was completely restored to its former splendor, however, the decorations remained minimal. Meanwhile, he quietly bought all the houses that were for sale in the neighborhood. That night, he went to bed, but a few minutes later, he had to close the window because of a terrible storm that began outside. He looked out, shook his head, and looked again. He saw Laura and Tim huddled in the doorway, wet and shivering. He got angry. He took 2 raincoats, sometimes used by workers, and ran downstairs, not paying attention to the fact that his own clothes were getting soaked. "What are you up to?" he shouted. "You'll freeze to death out here. Put these on and come inside." Laura initially wanted to refuse, but after looking at Isaac, she decided to accept. When they were safe in Isaac's house, she looked down at the floor in embarrassment and said quietly, "I'm sorry. I panicked and didn't think." Isaac immediately calmed down and answered softly, "Sorry for shouting. It's just a reaction to concern for people." "What happened?" "The electrical panel exploded," Laura explained. "Okay, someone will take a look tomorrow. You can stay here tonight. I'll change the bed for you and Tim to sleep in. I'll sleep on the cot. Tomorrow, we will deal with your house. And please, no objections." Isaac found some t-shirts and showed Laura the bathroom, telling her and Tim to take a hot shower. He set up his flip phone in the office to rest. When he heard a quiet noise, he turned around and saw Laura standing in the doorway. In an instant, he noticed her beautiful figure. To hide his embarrassment, he asked a little rudely, "Do you need something? How can I help you?" "Yes, you big idiot," Laura replied. "I need to thank you. So, can I kiss you goodnight?" She blushed as she kissed Isaac on the cheek. "Why the hell did your ex leave you and treat you so badly?" "I don't know. Anyway, I put it behind me now that she's behind bars." Laura sat up abruptly, and this did not go unnoticed. Isaac stood up and said, "I'm willing to tell you the short version of the story, but you need to dress more modestly. You'll find my robe next to the door in the bedroom." Laura blushed and ran away, showing her buttocks and legs. A few moments later, she returned much more decently dressed. Isaac told her that he designed and installed backup security systems as a hobby and that he hid them so well that criminals never found them. The external system was accessible via the internet, which is exactly what happened in the prison and caused the downfall of the illegal trade and the sheriff. The other system was hidden in the house and was not accessible to Isaac. To be honest, he thought it was destroyed and didn't worry about anything until he saw that his office was practically untouched and was only used as a dumping ground. On the hard drives, among other things, he found evidence of his innocence. When he finished, he sent Laura to bed. A busy day awaited them tomorrow. The next morning, a contractor came to inspect the damage to Laura's house. K2 came with him, so Isaac introduced Laura to Fabian. Her small hand completely disappeared into his large palm. Then Timothy came up, and they also shook hands. Fabian pulled his knees up and said, "Careful, it hurts. You're stronger than you think." The ice was broken, and they went inside for coffee, where Fabian whispered to Laura, "Don't drink his coffee without water." Laura laughed in response, "I know. This morning I perked up because of what he calls coffee." The contractor returned with bad news. Laura's house was almost uninhabitable due to neglect. Laura started crying. Isaac got straight to the point. "K2, can you install a lock on my bedroom and give Laura the keys?" He looked at Laura and asked, "Who is your landlord?" "My ex," Laura sobbed. "And he doesn't want to sell me the house." Isaac turned to K2. "Take care of that too, okay? Nice and evaluate first before bidding him." Laura asked in surprise, "Why a castle?" "Because according to the neighbors, I still beat up women." "How late do you have to work today?" "I don't need to work. They pay me pennies, but they want 150% from me. With this salary, I can barely make ends meet and can't find another job again because of my ex." "What is your job?" "I studied organization and business. I specialized in both, and now I work as a secretary in a pool with other secretaries who are willing to provide more services." Isaac realized instantly that he had become very fond of this woman who tried her best to take care of her son while constantly dealing with her ex-husband. He needed a secretary, his workload was growing rapidly, and he wanted more time to himself. So he asked, "I need a full-time assistant. The work is becoming more than I can manage, and if I'm not careful, I'll become a prisoner of my own trust. Would you like to work for me here in this house, or even from your own house when it's renovated?" Laura blushed and felt warm. She stammered, "I have no references, and I need to be able to take care of Timothy." Seeing Laura hesitate, he added, "If you work from this house, I will set up a room for Tim, his own little office. And when necessary, I will help him with his homework." Isaac was silent for a minute and then said softly, "Go ahead, make up your mind. It will free you and benefit me too. It would be nice for me to work with someone I already know and like." "Do you like me?" Laura asked, very surprised. "Why not? If you were just a roommate, you'd be sitting in a long-term rental room right now. Now please say yes. Anna and Ben will discuss the rest with you." Laura threw herself into Isaac's arms, giving him a kiss on the cheek. "When do I start?" "Now. I suddenly have a desire to decorate my house and much more. You will stay here while you renovate your house, I hope?" "Yes, and Timothy will be delighted too. But first, I need to quit my old job. Can I use your phone?" Meanwhile, Timothy discovered an old robot that Isaac had made as a hobby. It was one of the few things they found intact in the house. He ran with it in his hands to Isaac. Tim exclaimed, "What is this? Who built this?" Isaac smiled happily at the boy and replied, "I did. Let's find some batteries and a remote control so you can play with it outside." 10 minutes later, the little robot was rolling down the driveway to the joyful cries of an 11-year-old boy. While he was doing this, Isaac arranged for a babysitter for Tim. An hour later, he and Laura went to a large shopping mall. "I quit," Laura said. "They weren't happy and offered me a promotion and more work." "Ha," Isaac responded as he maneuvered into the parking lot. "I hope it's too little, too late. What did they offer?" Laura looked at the man next to her and noticed the worry in his eyes. She thought he really cares. She felt warm, and for the first time in a long time, she spontaneously felt a little attracted to him. Laura decided to tease a little and asked, "What do you have to offer?" Isaac was not taken aback. "You will start with $4,000 a month, in hand, free housing, and my eternal gratitude." "Deal?" Laura exclaimed happily, "But free housing? You haven't bought a house yet. Don't underestimate Fabian's negotiation skills. And no, he will actually ask politely after 2 weeks." Laura was amazed at how quickly and efficiently the ex-con crew worked. She had already begun moving some of her belongings back to her now free home, but did so with some sadness. Laura became increasingly attached to the sometimes gloomy man. Their working relationship was firmly established. Their day began with an hour of cardio and workouts. It was a routine that Isaac had adopted in prison under Fabian's guidance, which had gotten him into very good shape, and he wanted to stay that way. Laura had difficulty coping with the workouts at first, but was already noticing a difference in her condition. The work she found was sometimes difficult, but like the training, she learned to cope with it. A few nights later, Tim announced that he had a new math teacher. Laura didn't think much of it, only half listening to his happy talk. She was thinking about Isaac and how she could show her feelings for him when she noticed a car in her driveway. She wasn't expecting guests, so she watched for a while. The driver didn't come out, but then her attention was diverted by Timothy, who was enthusiastically talking about assembling his robot with Isaac's help. Half an hour later, she looked again and saw that the car was still there, with the driver still sitting inside. Laura became curious as to why and went outside to find out. She approached the driver's door and knocked on the window. The driver was Thomas, also known as Tommy, who had recently gotten a job as a math teacher at a school in the area where Laura used to live. After her mother was sentenced to prison, including for perjury, Tommy had to interrupt her studies in artificial intelligence to get a job. That's where she had heard him talking enthusiastically about the construction work, and she felt a pang of jealousy. She had done this with her father before her mother went crazy and got involved with that freak. Later that day, As she was writing invitations to a parent-teacher meeting, she looked up Tim's address, and her world turned upside down. Could it be my father helping Tim? Did my dad return to that house after everything that happened there? She thought. She needed to find out. An hour later, she sat in her car with small binoculars, watching her father sit in front of his house. She was struck by how much older he looked compared to the last time she saw him. When she said goodbye to school, she could not hold back her tears but was afraid to approach him. Her mother had once written Isaac a letter after his release, begging for forgiveness and asking if they could be friends in the future. Isaac's answer, delivered through his lawyer, was, "Only if you give me back 5.5 years of my life, otherwise, stay away." Suddenly, there was a knock on the window. Tommy looked out, startled, and tearfully lowered the window. The woman looked at her and said, "You're clearly not okay. Go inside to calm down a little. You're in no condition to drive right now." Tommy, confused, allowed the woman to lead her inside. Tim met her there. "Hello, Miss Tommy. Why did you come to visit us?" Tim asked. Laura was stunned but maintained her composure. "I'm Laura." "Who are you?" "Thomas, but you can call me Tommy. I teach Tim math." Laura's head clicked. "Tommy? You mean Tommy?" Tommy nodded sadly. "Yes, he's my father. I haven't seen him for more than 6 years." She slowly said, "Be to the floor." Laura picked her up and sat her down on the sofa. She asked Tim to get some water and then added, "Tim, please go to your room. We need to talk." Tim left immediately, and Laura turned to Tommy. "We need to talk, but first, you're in no condition to drive, so you'll stay here for the night. If I've learned anything from your father, it's to help when needed." Tommy sighed with relief. Now she finally had someone to talk to, even if it was a stranger. She looked at Laura with a questioning look, and Laura understood her unspoken question. She said, "I know almost everything. The only thing your father never mentioned was your role in all of this, only that you were adopted by Peter Ramsey." Tommy shook her head decisively. "I was never adopted. I refused, and in the end, they gave up. When I realized what they did to my father, I stopped talking to my mother. When that idiot tried to enter my room without knocking while I was getting dressed, I hit him. I left that house when I turned 18. I could no longer call it home. Soon after that, the man and my mother broke up." Laura digested this information. Isaac was sure that his daughter was adopted. She said, "After a while, I think we need to find a way to convince your father to let you back into his life. I want him to be as happy as he can be. You know, he still has a photo of you in a desk drawer." The tone in which Laura delivered her speech made Tommy look at her carefully, realizing the truth. Tommy touched Laura's hand and said lightly, "We haven't known each other for long, but one thing is absolutely clear to me, you love him, don't you?" Devastated, Laura blushed and answered with sadness in her voice, "Yes, but I don't know if I have a chance with him." "Maybe I can help you," Tommy said. "If I tell you what I know about my dad from my experiences and from what my mom told me before she had a breakdown because of that idiot sheriff. Are you really ready to help?" Laura asked, barely containing her emotions. "My mother once told me that under the shell and bragging, there is a very shy man who in no way wants to impose himself on a woman. The more he loves her, the more he keeps his distance." Laura suddenly perked up. "Really? He's attentive? Do you suddenly find flowers on your table? Tim told me you were out shopping. Have you looked at something in a store that you liked, and suddenly it was delivered the next day?" Laura could only confirm all this. "He loves you, don't worry. My mother also told me that she had to go after him quite aggressively. Please take care of my father. I desperately want him to be happy. I want to see him so badly. I can try, but I don't have the 5 years he asked for." That was his demand, to give him back his 5 years of life. Tommy's tears threatened to flow again. Laura had a very bad night after a very emotional evening. A stranger slept in her house and told her how the man she had fallen in love with felt. Now that she understood a little about how Isaac worked, she needed to find a way to break through his shield. She tried to come up with a plan, thinking of several scenarios but dismissing them just as quickly. Eventually, she decided to start dressing prettier. At that moment, she also did not understand how she could reunite father and daughter. Isaac was already training when Laura entered his small gym. He looked pleasantly surprised. While her usual sweatpants were still in place, her loose shirt had been replaced with a crop top that showed off her cleavage. Taking a closer look at her, he noticed that she had lost a little weight. Halfway through the training session, Laura decided to test Tommy's claim. She needed more attractively clothes anyway, so she asked Isaac, "Can I have the day off? We are working at full capacity. I need to relax a little, and I need some new clothes, so I'd like to go shopping today." "Tim is at school until 5, Isaac exclaimed enthusiastically. "That's a good idea. Do you mind if I join you? I would also like to spend a day away from the office." This was exactly what Laura wanted to hear, but she pretended to think about it. She noticed that Isaac's face immediately changed from happy to somewhat worried, so she quickly said, "I would really like that. A little friendly company, you can help me choose." "Are you sure? I won't be mad at you if you want to go alone. You know I'm also your employer," Isaac said, giving her an excuse. "Yes, but you are also a dear friend," she replied before lightly kissing his cheek. "But there is one hard rule." "A hard rule? What's the rule?" "No talk about work," Laura replied with a slight smirk, seeing Isaac smile. Mission complete, Laura thought joyfully. "Now let's finish this training." "Yes, boss," Isaac joked. An hour later, the three of them were driving first to Tim's school, and after dropping Tim off, to the shopping center. They arrived early, so Isaac and Laura leisurely drank coffee before doing their shopping. For Isaac, Laura firmly told him that he needed to give up his convict image and start wearing clothes that would show him off in a better light. After Isaac was secured, Laura's fun began. She teased Isaac mercilessly, starting at the lingerie store. She had lost what she called mom fat, and it transformed her breasts from a slightly sagging D cup to a firmer but smaller C cup, which went well with her improving figure. Her waist was smaller, and so were her buttocks, but they were much firmer and more defined. Her legs were now toned and smooth. Additionally, since she didn't have to worry as much about getting through the week financially, she became more confident and calm. Turning sideways, she admired her new image in the dressing room mirror and smiled. Part of the smile was because she had deliberately left the curtains partly open so Isaac could take a look, and his red face told her that he had done so. After that, she tried on several dresses and one set of underwear. In one dress, her breasts were pushed up a little, so the neckline became deeper, and she noticed Isaac took notice. She was singing inside another dress that she thought was really pretty but was out of her budget. With a sigh, she returned it to the counter. Then she went to the sportswear department and completely missed Isaac's gesture towards the saleswoman. After lunch, they argued amicably about who would pay the bill. Of course, Laura lost. When they returned to the car, loaded with bags and boxes, Laura never noticed the extra bag among the rest of her purchases, along with a bottle of her favorite perfume. At home, Laura unpacked her things and found the items she had bought. Tommy was great, she thought, feeling herself getting warm. I really have a chance, Dan. The next day, she showed up at the gym wearing a different top but this time in tight leggings. In the mirror, she saw Isaac watching her. Every time she seemed not to be looking, he peeked but did not hint at any movement. On the third day, she was in despair. As the training neared the end, her reddened eyes filled with tears. Isaac looked at her face and immediately stood next to her, asking, "What's the matter, Laura? You are crying. Is there anything I can do to help?" For pennies for pounds, Laura thought. Here it is. I have a problem with a man. What is he doing to you? Is he hurting you? The problem is that I love him. I'm actually in love with him. Laura saw Isaac swallow his saliva and turn pale but continued, "The thing is, he doesn't respond to my advances. Now I don't know what to do. Do you have any ideas?" Isaac stammered, "Laura, you've come to the wrong place for advice, but, I'll try. If this man is so stubborn, then he needs to be hit over the head. He'd be extremely stupid to ignore you. You're smart and beautiful, and you have a big heart. Be as straightforward as possible. He will come to his senses. Isaac and Laura were sitting on the sports bench. Laura stood up, turned to Isaac, and sat on his lap so that he could not leave. Blushing, she said, "I'll be as frank as possible." She took a deep breath. "Isaac, are you going to make love to me here or in your bed?" To say that Isaac was confused was an understatement. He stuttered, "What? You mean me?" "Yes, you fool." "Laura, are you in love with me?" "Seriously?" Her nod and smile made him smile back as he realized the truth. "Oh, this makes me so happy. Laura, please believe me, I love you too. I've been in love with you since you sat dirty on your doorstep. So why didn't you tell me?" "You're stupid," she said with affection. "I couldn't. I'm your employer and I'm your landlord. Laura, when I first helped you, I promised no strings attached, no returns. Just a friendly face and an occasional cup of coffee is enough, do you remember?" Laura kissed him. "Sometimes you're too decent for your own good. Now that problem is solved, the question remains, here or in the bedroom?" Isaac took her hand, led her into the bedroom, and closed the door behind him. "Isaac, it's time to pick Tim up from school, so one of us needs to go take a shower. Why don't we take a shower together?" Isaac suggested lazily. "Oh no. If you get in the shower with me, we'll never make it in time to get Tim. I'll shower first and go get Tim." Isaac didn't like it very much, but needs must be met when it comes time to act. Laura took a shower, got dressed, and went to her car. When she arrived at school, Tim was already waiting with Tommy. She walked over and sent Tim into the car. Tommy smirked slightly and spoke, "It seems you have found your man, or vice versa. You were just walking a little funny." Laura laughed loudly and said, "Thank you for the little information about your father. You were so right. I almost had to drag him to bed." After a short silence, she added, "Sorry, Tommy. I don't know what your mother was thinking when she allowed herself to be seduced by that Ramsey. Your father is a wizard now. I promise to reintroduce you into your father's life, but please be patient. He is extremely sensitive on this topic." Laura's window of opportunity opened 6 weeks later. As usual, they played sports in the morning, but Laura didn't have the strength, and it was taking its toll. Isaac began to watch her more closely. Later that morning, she refused a cup of coffee, saying she preferred tea, and when someone walked by with a cheddar sandwich, she had to rush to the bathroom. Seeing this, Isaac understood enough. When Laura returned from a surprise visit, he told her to take the day off because he still had to go see a client, even though the client was a big lie. As soon as Laura disappeared into her house, he drove his car to a shopping center where there was a good jeweler. The next morning, Laura felt a little better but refused to train, saying she had a virus. She went to bed and arrived at her office at 9:30. She expected Isaac to be at the table, but someone told her he was in the workshop. Strange. He always goes there in the afternoon, and he didn't even say hello. What's going on here, she thought, and went to her desk. On her desk, she found 2 small boxes with numbers 1 and 2. She opened box number 1 and found a beautiful antique pocket watch with a gold chain. There was a note under the clock. She unfolded the paper and read it. Time flies and life is too short to waste. An employer wonders if his personal assistant allows him to make her an offer. He thinks she is beautiful inside and out, and that over time, she will become even more beautiful. Laura felt warm inside. With trembling hands, she opened the second gift and found 3 different pregnancy tests. She could definitely feel the heat running through her body now. Pregnant, she thought. And Isaac noticed it first. We completely forgot about protection. She thought warmly, he seems to accept it, perhaps even be happy about it. Laura was still confused, and her thoughts were racing in different directions. Happiness, anxiety, surprise, all of this fought for dominance in her mind. She stood there until she heard a quiet cough. She turned around and saw Isaac standing in the doorway. She blushed again, this time deep down to her neckline. Speaking modestly, she said, "Yes, my employer can make an offer." Silently, he took her hand and led her outside. There, in the sun, he asked loudly and clearly, "Laura, will you do me the honor of becoming my wife?" "Yes." "You are a fool, you didn't have to ask formally." "I would say yes either way." Then she realized that about 100 men and women had witnessed this small scene. There was now loud applause and cheers as he gently placed the emerald-shaped palladium diamond wedding ring on her finger. "Oh my God," she exclaimed. "This is wonderful." Tim came over with a bottle of champagne and 2 glasses. Isaac told the bride-to-be, "I bet on yes, as you can see." Isaac then turned to the others and shouted, "Everyone here can take a glass from the garden." When the celebration was over, Isaac and Laura went into Isaac's house. Laura was tired from all the emotions, congratulations, and handshakes. They sat comfortably in the living room and looked out the large window at the forest. After sitting there in silence, enjoying each other's company, Isaac asked, "Where do you want to live? Can you live here, on the ruins of my former life? Do we need to build a new house? This house still needs major renovations, especially if you're pregnant. What do you want to do with your old house?" "That's a lot of questions. I like this house. It is spacious, bright, and associated with many happy memories for me. If I can participate in the renovation, let's stay here, please. As for my old house, it's yours. So why ask me? When Fabian bought it, I decided to re-register the documents in your name, so now it's up to you. But I would not like to introduce an unknown factor, that's why I'm asking if you know anyone or if anyone wants to live there. If you want to sell it, I'll just buy it from you. You still have to decide." Isaac smiled. A big chance flashed through Laura's head, but she needed to tread carefully. Isaac would agree to anything without hesitation now. If she asked him to jump off a cliff at that moment, he would do it without hesitation. She didn't want him to feel manipulated. Maintaining an outward calm despite the emotions raging inside, she replied, "I need to think. Perhaps I know someone." The next day, after school, Tim was free, so Isaac and Laura decided to go for an early lunch, pick up Tim, and head to the park. Isaac discussed changes he wanted to make to the house and surrounding area. He wanted to add a pool with massage jets for relaxation or serious swimming, and a balcony with doors to the master bedroom. He suggested building an extension to Tim's house first, with a door to the main house and later with its own entrance. There were other ideas, but nothing drastic. After finishing, Isaac asked if Laura had already found a candidate for her house. Laura nodded, took a deep breath, and said, "Yes, I have a candidate, and I really don't want to offer it to you. Can you promise to listen to me first, think about it, and only then answer? Please trust me on this." Isaac immediately felt uneasy but replied, "Yes, I can do it. I'll listen first, think about it, and promise not to react impulsively, although I suspect I won't like it." Laura replied, "I think that if you can step over your shadow, you will like it and it will make you very happy. Well, that's all. You know that Tim has a new math teacher, right? And he's very pleased with her." Isaac just nodded. "She desperately needs a place to live. The house she lives in now has been taken over by the bank, and she needs to move out within 2 weeks." Isaac asked, "What's the problem?" "Her name is Thomasina Manor, and I emphasize Manor, not Ramsey, as you always thought." Isaac was stunned into silence. He couldn't make a sound. Finally, almost exploding, he said, "What?" Laura chimed in, "You promised." "You're right," he muttered. Laura took Isaac's hands and began to explain in a soft voice, "She never knew what they did to you. She thought that the makeup artist was working on his portfolio. Her testimony was distorted by Ramsey. Every time she contacted the authorities with a complaint and wanted to see you and free you, she was denied because of Ramsey. The judge was on his payroll, and before your sentence, even your ex-wife thought it was just a way to put pressure on you. And by the way, Tommy hit Ramsey. I checked her story through Fabian last night, he confirmed everything." As Laura told the story, Isaac's face went through a spectrum of colors, red, purple, and pale. When she finished, he was as white as a sheet. She shook his hands, looked into his face, and saw tears running down his cheeks. Isaac whispered, "Poor girl. So what do we do now? His mind was a mess. He could only think about almost 7 years lost. Laura kissed him tenderly and lovingly, snapping Isaac out of his personal hell. Finally, he came to his senses. Ramsey will pay for this, and it will be a very big bill. Please don't do anything stupid. I don't want the father of our child. Yes, all 3 tests were positive. That's another thing I wanted to tell you. I don't want the father of our child to be in prison again. That won't happen. I won't do anything illegal to that scoundrel. But what should we do with Tommy? Leave it to me. Can you take an Uber home? I can do better. The contractor will take me back. He still needs to start drawing up estimates for work on the house if you agree with them. Laura smiled. Your ideas sound great. I trust you completely. Now I'll go get Tim and Tommy. When she arrived at school, Tim was already running towards her, and Laura whispered, Can you call Miss Manor? Tim ran off again and returned a moment later with Tommy, who looked a little worried. To relieve the tension, Laura smiled as joyfully as possible and exclaimed, I have a home for you. Really? And I can pay for it? Laura replied, Oh yes, easy. Get in the car and we'll go take a look now. Yeah, why not? Tommy made up her mind. She couldn't help but trust this woman and got into the car. Laura took her home. When Tommy saw Laura's house, she was confused. After Tim rushed inside, Laura said, Here's your new home. Tommy was completely dumbfounded. Like this? This is your home? No, I'm getting married, and you can afford it? Seriously, you just need to meet the owner. Tommy became wary. I'm not going to sleep with him, she exclaimed. Laura laughed loudly. No, honey, he won't even think about it. Tommy was still confused. She asked, When can I meet your mystery landlord and when can I move in? Laura beamed as she said, Now and tomorrow. As for now, we just need to go to the house nearby. By the way, Tim and I, and the baby, will also live there. Finally, Tommy got it. Laura watched with pleasure as the expressions on Tommy's face changed. Her mouth opened and closed, open again, making incomprehensible sounds. She alternately turned pale and red, and finally managed to mutter, your father? Yes, and he really wants to meet you. We will get married because we will have a little brother or sister, Laura exclaimed happily. Tommy felt a mix of emotions. She was thrilled to have a proper place to live, excited to see her father, and surprised to be a big sister. Moreover, she was full of fears because she didn't know what to tell her father. In the almost 7 years of his absence, she had composed entire speeches and dreamed up scenarios for their reunion, but now she could not remember any of them. Laura took Tommy's hand and literally pushed her towards what she now called the main house. Tim ran forward and knocked loudly on the door, as he always did. Isaac opened it and asked hesitantly, Hey, big guy. You're alone? Tim answered cheerfully, No, Mom came with my math teacher. She will live in our house, isn't it? Isaac looked at the 2 women and said, Oh wow, this is truly a sight to behold, 2 of the most beautiful and important women in my life standing next to each other. When the women approached the threshold, he whispered quietly, his voice trembling, Tommy, you have become such a beautiful woman. Can I hug you? Tommy literally flew into his arms, sobbing, Daddy. They stood there for a long time, enjoying the moment, until Laura called them inside. Once inside, Tommy took a close look at her father. He had changed a lot. In fact, he looked much older than she remembered. His face was furrowed, especially around his eyes, giving him a melancholic appearance. She remembered that her father always had a slightly full waist, but now there was no trace of fat left, only skin, muscles, and bones. Oh, Dad, I'm so sorry. Laura interrupted their tearful reunion. Perhaps it would be better if you continue your acquaintance somewhere alone while I start preparing dinner. I'm guessing you'll stay for dinner too, Tommy? Tommy walked up to Laura and hugged her tightly. Thank you so much. I'm so happy now, and it's all thanks to you, Mom. Laura smiled through her tears. I will do anything to make my Isaac happy. Now go talk to your father. Isaac and Tommy sat comfortably in the office, where one corner was furnished with comfortable chairs and coffee tables. Isaac offered Tommy a soft drink, saying there was alcohol in prison, but only the kind they made themselves. I never touched it, and when I came out, I decided that I could do without it. It doesn't bother me if others drink. Tommy nodded, saying, I don't know where to start. Are you really offering me Laura's house? I see some difficulties. Isaac laughed softly. I thought about that. The only problem that might arise is the restraining order she put out on me. I understand that she has no place to live after leaving prison, and you have plenty of space. Tommy, listen carefully. This is your home because you are Laura's tenant, and as such, I cannot prevent you from having guests, and I won't. But there is one thing, your mother must stay away from me. I don't want to see her in my garden or on my doorstep. She is not welcome here. I will ignore her if I see her on the street. If you can live with that, the rest is left unsaid. I understand, Dad. This is only until she gets back on her feet. There are other reasons why I don't want Mom to live with me indefinitely. Isaac raised an eyebrow but remained silent. Tommy took a deep breath and continued, I have a boyfriend, and we're serious. I need space and privacy. In fact, my mom and I haven't been getting along since she lost her way because of that scoundrel. I hope Mom finds a job and a place to live as soon as possible. Isaac picked up the mood and replied, Is she still an accountant? Perhaps I can help her with a job. She should have enough money to pay her rent. I paid almost $500,000 to get rid of her. There should be something left of that. No, Dad. She got ripped off by that scoundrel, and now he's completely broke. Last I heard, he spent his entire fortune on compensation payments. And yes, she's still a registered accountant and, after the scoundrel, also a legal advisor. Karma is a wicked thing. I'll see if I can't find her a job, but don't tell her that. I'm guessing you're visiting her in prison? Tommy nodded in response, and it was at that moment that Laura announced that dinner was ready. A few weeks later, Isaac and his daughter were talking in the study of their large house. He asked, When was the last time you visited your mother? Right before I moved here, I think. Remember, this is your mother, you only have one. So please keep in touch with her. You may be sorry if you don't. Before Tommy could respond, there was a loud knock on the door. Isaac said, It's Fabian. Only he knocks like that, and went to open the door. Tommy heard Fabian's loud voice saying to Isaac, Doc, may I introduce my son, Julian? Hearing this, she ran out of the room to see Laura and Fabian. Meanwhile, Fabian continued, He makes me proud. Even though his father was in prison, he became a teacher. When he told me he wanted to meet you, I thought I'd like to see you too. Julian, his face red with embarrassment, stammered, It's good to see you, sir. My father told me a lot about you, but actually, I came to ask you something. Okay, ask away. There was an awkward silence for a moment, during which Julian looked at his feet before saying quietly, Alone, please. Isaac led him into the office and found that Tommy had already left. He pointed Julian to a chair and, when he sat down, asked, How can I help you, Julian? Julian quickly blurted out, Sir, I want to ask Thomasina to marry me. We have loved each other for a long time, and I think it's time to make an honest woman out of her, with your blessing. That's why I came, sir, to ask for your blessing. Isaac smiled from ear to ear. I know you're listening, Thomas. Come out of hiding and introduce yourself. Tommy entered the office smiling. Yes, Dad. This dear young man wants to marry you and asks for my blessing. Should I give it? Yes, please, Dad. I'd really like that. Isaac stood up from his chair and extended his hand. You have my blessing, son. Take care of my daughter. It's time to celebrate. Isaac followed Julian into the living room as Tommy held him back. Dad. Yes, darling? Julian doesn't know yet. I'll tell him in a minute, but we're in a bit of a rush right now. You'll be a grandfather in about 7 months. The doctor confirmed it this morning. Tommy, daughter, you make me so happy that I could burst. How about a double wedding with Laura and me? That would be great. We can discuss it later, after Fabian leaves. They walked into the living room, where Laura had a grin on her face and Fabian looked completely unaware of what was happening. As Isaac sat down, Julian said to Fabian with a big, joyful smile, "Dad, let me introduce you to my future wife. This is Thomasina. Mr. B. Manor has just given us his blessing. Can we have yours too?" Fabian's face was a sight to behold. He said, "Yes, of course, if that's what you want." Isaac hugged him. "Come on, big friend. Now we're becoming family in more ways than one. Who would have thought, huh?" Across from them, Julian looked puzzled. Tommy said to Julian with a very happy face, "Yes, you will become a dad." Julian did a little dance of joy as Tommy explained to the others, "When we decided to stay together, we also decided that we wanted to have children while we were still young, so we stopped using protection." Julian's first salvo was a clean hit. "So, Mr. Small, you have a daughter and a grandson." 2 weeks later, Lydia sat in front of her daughter. "You look radiant, Tommy." "Yes, Mom. I have a place to live and I'm going to get married. Life has been kind to me." "Oh, that's wonderful. Where do you live, and when is the wedding?" Tommy gave the address and enjoyed the look on her mother's face when she recognized it. "It's next to where Isaac used to live." "How can you afford that?" "It's next to my dad. He still lives there. I found him, and we were reunited." She then asked her daughter, "Can I stay with you when I am released? I have nowhere to go. The house is sold, and I need a new job too." Tommy took a deep breath. She didn't want Lydia to know that her father had already taken care of this job. She simply said, "You can come and live with me until the baby is born. I'll need a room by then. You talked about working with Excom Services. They specialize in helping convicts find work or business. Your child? Are you expecting a baby? Why didn't you tell me this?" Lydia asked, judging by the way Tommy spoke to her, that she was still angry with her. "Can't you forgive me?" Tommy was stunned for a moment. "Is she really that heavy?" She replied, not holding back the anger in her voice, "Mom, it's only because Dad tells me that I only have one mother and that I should keep in touch. Otherwise, the last time you would have seen me was when you went to prison. You cost me over 6 precious years with my father, and why? Because you were too selfish and too cowardly to do the right thing. And now we talk a lot with my dad's girlfriend about everything. I really don't understand how you fell in love with that idiot when you had my father. How could you do this?" It was Lydia's turn to be stunned by such an onslaught. She was silent. It was obvious to her that she had some serious problems to settle with Tommy. It was also shocking that Isaac had a girlfriend. She never thought Isaac could move on so quickly after being released. She also didn't expect him to leave and live in the house that had brought him so much suffering, knowing that it had been trashed since she had gone there once after breaking up with Peter. She wondered how he had so much money to fix it. As Tommy left and Lydia returned to her cell, Tommy's harsh words still echoed in her head. Lydia had left Peter almost immediately when it became clear that she had been played, and the money had suddenly disappeared. Peter wanted Isaac out of the way, not only because he wanted her, but also because he wanted to find a place for his illegal activities. Lydia had tried to be a good mother to Tommy and thought Tommy's almost hostile behavior towards her was due to her maturing. She now realized how much she had hurt her little girl, who seemed to be much more attached to her father than she had ever thought. Tommy's words had cut deep into her soul. Lydia was incredibly upset that Tommy was pregnant and hadn't told her right away. When Lydia heard that Tommy was getting married, she realized she had a very deep and wide gap to cross before Tommy would open up to her again. Lydia was sitting in her room at Tommy's house. It was not a warm welcome, but at least Tommy had said, "Welcome back, Mom. You are our guest. May I introduce you to Julian Small, my future husband and the father of our child?" The introductions took place, and Tommy continued, "You are free to use everything in this house while you are looking for a job. You can use the laptop I have placed in your room. Have you contacted Excon yet?" Lydia looked at her feet as she said, "I tried, but for some reason, they were not interested in me. It seemed like I was banned. I'll ask my father." "Maybe he knows why you weren't contacted," Julian said. "He, among others, has the final say in hiring people through Excon Services. He was also the one who knew on behalf of Isaac that you should be treated with respect and not harmed. Otherwise, it would be very difficult for you inside. Isaac is highly respected. What does your father have to do with my ex-husband? Lydia asked. Mom, I know what you're thinking. Do not even try. Dad doesn't want anything to do with you. Nothing. You understand? Tommy interrupted angrily, phrasing it more as a command than a question. Julian continued the story about Isaac and Fabian. There was another piece of the puzzle for Lydia. That's why it was as easy as possible for her to decide to rest for a while, but deep down she wanted her life back with Isaac. Tommy knocked and told Lydia that she had a visitor. Frightened, Lydia fell as a giant man stood in the corridor. Julian was tall, but this man was the same height as her and twice as wide. The mountain of a man turned around and introduced himself in a low, rumbling voice. Good afternoon. I'm Fabian Small. Julian told me that you haven't received a response to your job request, right? I almost realized that everyone should avoid me like the plague. You should have been avoided. It's right. Your association with Peter Ramsey has put you in danger, so I will speak a word in Isaac's name. He felt responsible. He was responsible for the evidence that ultimately sent you to prison. When Ramsey found out who provided evidence of his final demise, he threatened you and my future daughter-in-law. That's why we had to isolate you. I heard that you were looking for a job, Fabian continued. Yes, I was a registered accountant and worked as a paralegal for the prosecutor until we were both arrested, assistant lawyer, accountant. Good. I'm with HDM, a company that deals with security and security systems. My company and fund, Bean Investments, are in need of an accountant. I can offer you a decent salary. We will hire you for a month, and after that, if you prove competent and compatible with our staff, you will receive a permanent contract, and we will provide you with housing for free. There's one condition: you should not try to contact Isaac in any way. I will be your immediate superior. Do you agree to this? I don't have a choice, do I? Lydia asked. Of course, you have a choice. You can refuse. Lydia was silent for a moment, stunned by how far Isaac kept himself from her despite taking care of her immediate needs. She asked Fabian about it. The answer is simple, Fabian said. We try to provide for all ex-con clients. The exception with you is that Isaac will have nothing to do with you for obvious reasons. Lydia was shocked again, this time by the direct, almost hostile response. She said in a trembling voice, I agree to the terms. Fabian didn't expect anything different. Okay, tomorrow you can come with Julian to our office to sign contracts and go through the HR department. We'll also arrange a small rental car for you. We have a garage that can be used by employees, a decent car for a reasonable price, but that's all for next month. With these words, Fabian said goodbye and left, leaving Lydia confused. She stood and wanted to go up to her room when she saw the binoculars. She took them and went upstairs, noticing Fabian approaching the door of Isaac's house and being warmly greeted by her ex-husband. Lydia didn't have time to get a good look at Isaac, so she put the binoculars next to the window. She began making a list of demands to start her life over. It was almost dark when Lydia heard a car drive up the street. She wondered who it could be, as Tommy and Julian were having dinner at a restaurant and couldn't come back so soon. She looked out the window and saw that the car had stopped in front of Isaac's door. The porch light turned on, and she saw Isaac get out of the car and then a very pregnant woman with light curly hair dressed in sweatpants and a tight t-shirt hugging her ex-husband. Even through the binoculars, one could see sparks jumping between them. Lydia felt a surge of jealousy, angry, lost, and deeply hurt. It had to be her man in her house. It took her a while to come to her senses, and she realized that she was the reason it was the woman and not her who was in the porch light. Devastated, she sat down. Lydia realized that she had acted terribly stupidly, but perhaps there was still a way back to Isaac's heart. Tommy's wedding was fast approaching, with only 2 weeks left, and Lydia was trying to find out as much as she could about Isaac. The binoculars were helpful. She could see Isaac's face, his silver-streaked hair, his bearing, and his slender body. She saw him interact with the boy Timothy, right? She couldn't help but feel another flash of envy. Isaac was so good with children. Lydia tried to get Tommy to talk about Isaac's pregnant lover but was constantly rebuffed. Neither Tommy, Julian, nor Fabian reacted to her inquiries. There was no direct answer to her questions. The day before Tommy's wedding, she was informed that Isaac and Laura were also going to get married, and Lydia was amazed. She had been invited to Tommy's wedding and couldn't refuse to attend, but the thought of having to see her ex-husband's wedding was a direct blow to her ego. She was devastated. All hope of rekindling her relationship with Isaac had vanished. That girl was pregnant with Isaac's child. Why hadn't she thought of this before? She felt so stupid. Lydia turned and gave final instructions to the movers who were transporting her belongings to the house provided by Isaac. Isaac had made an exception for Lydia so that she could attend the wedding and subsequent celebration at his and Laura's home. There was dinner, and after dinner, there was music and dancing. The dinner took place in a friendly atmosphere. The food was exceptional, and Lydia sat between two young men who engaged her in lively conversation about music and theater. When the dancing began, Lydia sat lost and forgotten in the corner, watching the fun. She was surprised that alcohol consumption was almost zero, and traditional dancing began, the bride and groom, the father of the bride with the bride, and the mother of the bride with. She saw Julian looking at Isaac, who nodded slightly. Julian walked over and addressed Lydia. "Madam, may I invite you to this dance?" he asked politely. Lydia stood up, took his hand, and walked out onto the dance floor. There, she felt her spirits lift as she loved to dance but hadn't done so for many years, and Julian was a good partner. From the corner of her eye, she could see Tommy and Laura talking to Isaac, who looked worried. The dance with Julian ended, and she was about to go back to her corner when she felt a light touch on her shoulder. She turned around and saw Isaac's face close to hers. She noticed his eyes, sad and deep, reflecting a lot of suffering. "Oh my God, what happened to him?" she thought. Suddenly, it became clear to her, she had done this to him. "What a scoundrel I am," she thought. She couldn't understand how she could look at herself in the mirror now. In a moment of madness, she had caused this man so much suffering and had the audacity to be jealous that he was able to get out of this hell she had created. In a matter of seconds, she lost all self-respect and confidence, physically shaking at the thought of what she had done to this man just for some thrills with a real bad guy. Then she realized that Isaac was waiting patiently, his hand outstretched. "Excuse me, did you ask something?" she asked quietly. Isaac repeated, "May I invite you to this dance?" Lydia, without a word, clung to Isaac and began to sob. After some time dancing, she calmed down a little. Using all her remaining strength, she whispered through her tears, "Isaac, I'm so sorry. I did this. I know you must hate me. I'm sorry I can't give you back your years." Isaac replied, "Lydia, I'm glad you're showing remorse. We're dancing because the two women I love most have convinced me to have compassion for you. I've done you a little of what you've done me, sighs, and you felt a little of the pain that I experienced. I say a little. Ramsey's words, you explain the rules to him and yours, get over it or else. The subsequent betrayal burned my soul. I hated you until I met Laura. She filled the void with her love, and any feelings she had for you evaporated. We dance here as strangers with a shared past. I won't avoid you anymore because of our daughter and soon-to-be grandson, but it will be a long time before I can call you a friend. Keep in mind I have two guards who will watch you like hawks with very sharp talons. They are not afraid to use them if you try to do anything they consider inappropriate towards me. Now, let's enjoy the dance together." Lydia almost inhaled the touch of this man whom she had once loved. It felt different. In times past, he had seemed a little soft to the touch, but now his shoulders felt bony and hard. His stance and movements showed strength and endurance. She remembered how skillful he was in bed and was again surprised at her own stupidity. It was only because of the exciting and dizzying power play when Isaac caught them together that she remained in Ramsey's clutches. Now she was paying a high and terrible price. Instead of helping her daughter on this most beautiful day of her life, she barely behaved like a guest. The father's fiancée, instead, acted as her daughter's mother. They were so close. Lydia noted that asking Julian to dance should have been as natural as breathing, but it required Isaac's permission. Both his wife and her daughter had to tell Isaac to step out of his shadow. Depression fell over her like an evening shadow in a gorge, sharply defined, inevitable, and heralding a long, cold night. She shuddered and clung to the man she had betrayed and lost. In Isaac's arms, she mourned all that she had thrown away. Isaac witnessed the fall of what was once a proud and beautiful woman into a broken, insecure person. He finished, "Now you have to fight to return, just as I fought." He quietly said in her ear, "There are people who will help and support you. I have provided you with the basics. The rest is up to you." The dance was over. Tommy walked over and said, "I can see this has been very emotional for you. Do you want to stay the night? I don't think you should drive right now. I don't want to lose my mom. Should I arrange for you to come home?" Lydia accepted the offer to return to her new home, and Ben and Anna drove her. Before arriving, Anna turned around in her seat and looked at Lydia. She said, "You are alone and friendless. You have done wrong and will take a long time to make amends. Tonight, we all saw you finally realize what you did to Isaac, not just how it was an inconvenience to you and damage control. That was Isaac's goal. He completely destroyed Ramsey, who was having a hell of a time in prison, and not in a good way. But Isaac is not trying to deprive his daughter of an adequate mother. Therefore, on behalf of Isaac, we offer you counseling. This will help you understand why you took the wrong path and deal with the consequences. All you need to do is think about it, and if you agree, tell Fabian." When Lydia arrived, she entered the dark house, took off her coat, and collapsed on the sofa. There, in the darkness, she let go of her emotions. At the forefront were remorse and a deep sense of loss, all due to her own actions. Isaac suffered but was able to move on and find new happiness. Now she had to try to do the same. What do you think of our long history today? In my opinion, the wife is totally at fault for sleeping with the sheriff. What's your opinion? Let me know in the comments. See you in the comments.